So I hand it over to Anne and Michael.
Okay. So
I'll just have you know, he just read everything and I just wrote everything, and now I'm going to.
She was the court adjudicator.
Nice, nice.
Yeah. Okay. So calcium. We're going to talk about the therapeutic uses. So what it's good for, is that right?
Yep.
So anxiety.
Yep.
Arthritis, backache, bone pain, colon cancer.
Yep.
Cramps. I'm slowing it down. Hyperthyroid. Yeah, no. Hypertensive factor. Hypertension. He was talking really quickly, so I had to scribble. Hypertension, lead toxicity, menopause symptoms. Menstrual issues, muscle cramp, osteoporosis, psychiatric patients, rheumatoid arthritis.
So they're the therapeutic.
So they're the. Would you like to read
No.
So let me just confirm, and you said they're the therapeutic uses of calcium?
Yeah, for those various conditions.
Yeah, so therapeutic basically means, by the way, this is a fun learning exercise for all of us. If you're actually reading something out and you don't actually know what it means yourself, or you're not sure, just say so. Just speak up. Because,
we Googled things.
What's that?
We Googled things. We were having fun.
That's good. That's great. Awesome. So carry on.
Okay, so the daily doses. It just we just wrote between 814 and 1400 RDA. Sorry. Which is I forgot.
This is what we had to Google. The recommended daily
dose.
Yeah,
no,
RDA is normally used in America, and it means recommended daily allowance. In Australia, we have RDI, which is basically the same thing. It means recommended daily intake, so it's pretty much the same thing.
Okay. So between 814 and 1400 milligrams.
SR.
And SR. No, that's the next one. Listen, stop it. And it said between 1,000 and 2,500 milligrams slow release, or SR.
Yeah.
And the deficiency limits are minus 200 milligrams. And this is interesting. Approximately 45% of the population are deficient.
Yes,
right.
Magnesium.
That means that's quite a lot. That's almost 1.5 of you three sitting in that room are deficient in calcium. I don't know which half, but yeah.
Probably.
Yeah, me probably.
Citrate and malate forms of calcium have good absorption profiles. I have no idea what that means.
Okay,
Anyway.
let me just quickly interject. Calcium is the element, is the nutrient, but usually it's an element, meaning it comes directly from the earth, but it binds with other things in the earth. You might have heard of lime or calcium carbonate, like the limestone cliffs that you see. Yep. They're made from calcium carbonate, but there are many other forms of calcium compounds. Calcium malate, as Anne was saying, and there's calcium chloride, there's calcium citrate. All that means is there's different forms of calcium, and the different forms of calcium have different absorption rates.
Okay. Yeah, we'll get to that later.
Go for it. Keep going.
The enzyme systems involved activates bone, kidney, kinases, endocrine, adrenal, psoriasis.
Deficiency.
Yeah. Pancreatic limpus. Wait, there may be more. That's all what that is.
Yeah, and they're the enzyme. Yeah.
Okay.
Go for it.
Deficiency symptoms. So symptoms of deficiency are hyper-irritability, stunted growth, bone demineralization,
Which one?
that tinnitus, that like
Yeah,
tinnitus,
yeah.
tetanium, anyway.
Tinnitus.
No, it's not. It's like
Tetanium, I can't read it either. Anyway,
How do you spell it?
convulsions. I think I spelled it how it sounded. So T-E-T-A-N-E, A-N-Y. That's probably not the correct spelling though.
It might be
Yeah,
tinnitus.
I'll tell you.
That's
I'll
it.
tell you.
He said that it meant tinnitus.
Yeah, tinnitus is to do with hearing or a funny sound in your ears, a ringing in your ears.
Tinnitus,
Yeah.
Right.
It's also a sign of spiritual awakening, apparently.
Where was we up to? Tetany. Is that the one?
Yeah, tetany. Tetany.
Tetany.
Tetany is different.
T-E-T.
Tetany is different. Tetany has to do with muscles. So it's
Oh, yeah.
beg your pardon?
I was going to say, within this section, it's got tetany, convulsions, and laryngospasm, which is the throat, I suppose.
That's right, yeah. So it can be a spasm or a type of cramping or a mixture of both, yeah, so it's different. So we'll scratch the tinnitus. Go with tetany. Go for it, Anne.
Okay. Factors increasing demand are alcohol, bed rest, bone fractures, caffeine, vitamin C deficiency, diarrhea, diabetes, diuretic use, depression, aging, increased intake of high fat, high blood pressure, high phosphate intake, high protein, sugar diets, high sodium intake, hyperpolyglycemia, hypothyroidism, intestinal malabsorptions, inactive parathyroid, is it?
Yeah, the parathyroid gland. It's responsible for maintaining calcium levels at the right level in your bloodstream. There's 4 little right here behind your thyroid gland. Your thyroid gland's here. Your parathyroid gland, they're really small, like little pea-shaped things, and there's 4 of them. When people have thyroidectomies, in other words, have their thyroids out for whatever reason, sometimes the parathyroid glands are accidentally removed as well. And the parathyroid glands are crucial in maintaining calcium levels in the blood.
Is that close to the parotid gland?
The parotid gland? No, the parotid gland it's close. They're just behind the thyroid gland, the parathyroid glands. The parotid gland's just slightly somewhere else, which has to do with salivary excretion. Yeah. I haven't studied my anatomy on that one for a long time, so I'm not sure how close it is, Michael, but that's a good point.
I only asked that because I had cancer and I had some removed, and yeah, I didn't know whether it affected. I was just thinking about that.
Yeah.
Gland.
The interesting thing is, if there's anything strange going on with your parathyroid glands, it'll show up in a blood test. Absolutely.
Okay.
So you'd probably know by now if that was the case.
Okay.
Okay, so kidney disease, chronic renal failure, lack of exercise, lactation, magnesium deficiency or pregnancy. Now, eating foods that bind calcium. Oh no, that's the next level. That's the next heading, I think.
Yeah, it is.
So eating foods that bind calcium are rhubarb, spinach, chard, cereal grains, rich in phytic acid.
Phytic acid.
Yeah.
Phytic acid. Phytic.
Yeah. We're nearly at the end of our presentation.
I'm really enjoying it.
Oh, great. So a source of calcium can be found in almonds, broccoli, bone meal, buckwheat, dairy products, egg yolk, green leafy vegetables, molasses, sardines, soybeans and turnips.
Wow.
And processing losses, so water softeners remove calcium from water. Rhubarb, spinach, chard, grain and cereals can decrease the absorption of calcium.
Great. Is that it?
That's our presentation.
Wow.
Yeah.
Fantastic.
You sound sarcastic, yeah, when you say that.
Sound disappointed.
That way I was very sarcastic.
I'm so glad it's over. No, I'm only kidding. I loved it. So, Graham, you all right?
Yeah, I'm enthralled.
I'm glad you had some fun doing the research. I mean, you know, as kids, we actually, and we've still got that childlike part of ourselves that just really likes to know stuff. We just like to be informed. What sometimes blocks us and stops us, and I saw that when you're reading it out, Anne, is all these big words, or, you know, so,
Yeah.
so my feeling in my life is that whenever you come across a big word, either look it up if you've got the time or the inclination, or just let it wash over you and keep going, because after a while you get the gist of what you're reading anyway, and you pick out what's of interest to you. So
I didn't hear the word osteoporosis mentioned at all.
I did.
I think
I heard it.
Did you?
Yeah, I did. Yeah.
What would you like to ask Jill to
So, Graham, you and I have the opportunity to ask the panel some questions. So go ahead. You go first.
Who's talking?
Graham's firing questions.
Firing
Oh,
questions.
This is his job now.
Thank you.
Why did you ask about osteoporosis, for instance?
I think my mother has, she doesn't have osteoporosis, but she was on the, like, early stages, I guess.
Yeah, osteopenia, it's called. Yeah.
Yeah, she's on medication, and she, you know, I think she's on calcium supplement, as well as, you know, dairy products, and it's, you know, she enjoys a glass of milk and whatnot.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think she was diagnosed as having a very, like, the very first stage of the thinning of the the structure of the bones. Yeah.
Yeah. So how is she? She doing okay?
Yeah, she's good now.
Yep.
She's going well.
Great.
She's on birthday coming up next weekend too.
That's fantastic. Can she walk around?
Yeah, no, she does well.
Okay.
She was having trouble there for a while, but she's I think combination of the medication, the supplements and that, and I think she lost a little bit of weight too. Not that she was big at all.
Yeah.
She's always been very, very small. But yeah, she's even.
Yep. So
no, she's going well. She walks everywhere.
Well, that's fantastic.
Yeah.
There's three things that are required for bone health, and this is particularly relevant to you, Anne. And I say that because the osteoporosis and osteopenia thing is more women after menopause. I'm not saying you've gone through menopause. I don't know if you've gone through.
I have actually.
Okay.
No, but I have. I was menopause early, so.
Okay.
And since then I've noticed that my bones seem to break easy.
Of course. Okay.
I mean,
So, all right. So, let me just interject a couple of things here. And there's a couple of things I wanted to say, actually, from the last few weeks that are specifically relevant to you, Anne, and to Graham. But just finishing with Graham's mother, and this is, of course, applies to all of us. It's not as simple. You know, with this whole thing with health and nutrition, our brains have a limited capacity, and we like to break things down into little chunks so we can understand them, and that's fine. But of course, the body itself is much more advanced than that. It is holistic. It does things. It is truly able to multitask and be aware of many things down at the cellular level. So what I mean by that is that in regards to calcium, there are at least 3 factors that are important for maintaining good bone health. And eating enough calcium is only one of them. The other one is making sure you have vitamin D, meaning exposure to the sun, because vitamin D, if you don't have any vitamin D, you're going to find it very difficult to absorb any calcium at all. That's the first thing. Second, the third thing is walking. And that's why I asked Graham about his mum. You must put pressure on the bones. That's one of the things you said, and that increases calcium requirements or can induce calcium deficiency even, is being bedridden. So when you're bedridden, you have 2 things. You can lose muscle mass, but you also lose bone mass. Why? Because you're not putting any pressure. You have to walk around, and when you walk around, because of gravity, you're actually putting pressure on your bones. And that is a stimulus for your bones to keep growing. The whole risk factor with women after menopause is that your estrogen levels go down. And therefore, what that does is affects your bone metabolism. So you go into a category where you're at risk of losing bone density rather than increasing bone density or maintaining bone density. And when I mean, I don't know if you've seen pictures of people with osteoporosis, but their bones become more and more porous. So severely, that your bones tend to look like sponges, whereas compared to a solid mass. So obviously you can imagine if your bone looks like a sponge, the risk of you breaking it are much more severe, much more significantly increased. So, so that's the whole thing. You know, people with osteopenia is the start of it, and then osteoporosis. Those people are more at risk of things like risk fractures, hip fractures. But then of course you can break bones in other parts of your body as well. So I just wanted to say that the 3 things: vitamin D, walking, and calcium, they're important. Now, while we're on your family, Graham, I just wanted to say something to you that in regards to that you brought up, and this has to do with calcium amongst other things. But if you're on a PPI, do you remember what a PPI is? You are on a PPI as a medication. So a medication, a proton pump inhibitor, in other words, something that reduces stomach acid, right? Doesn't prevent reflux. It minimizes reflux because it basically suppresses your stomach acid. So people who are on PPIs have really serious issues in properly being able to absorb several nutrients. And one of those nutrients is calcium. We've spoken about others like iron and protein and folate and B12, but just staying on calcium, that's important. So how do you know if you, Graham, have got issues with that? That's both a rhetorical question and a question that I'm going to lead in and hopefully help provide an answer to. But do you know how?
No.
All right. There are 2 ways.
No.
2 ways. Well, no.
Yes.
What's that?
You'd have to have a bone density test, wouldn't it?
Correct. Absolutely correct. You nailed it straight away. Have you ever had one?
No.
No. So
no,
can you flag that, and don't just take that as something you might address in 20 years' time, but do it now. Now, it's an unusual thing for a man to have that test, but then it's also unusual to be on a PPI for 20 years. Beg your pardon?
Does it hurt to have that test?
No.
What do they do?
Not at all. I've had one. It's a low dose X-ray scan. It's done at the radiology centre there, just near you guys there, just near the hospital. You have to have a referral. So just get. Is David still the GP there?
Yeah.
Yeah. So just ask David for a referral. Ask him that I recommended it, particularly because you've been on the PPI. And while you're doing that, start having a conversation with him in regards to, do I still need to be on this PPI? And if there isn't a simple yes or no answer to that, you can ask too, can we lower the dose of this PPI? Because what you're doing is going against all the natural functions of your body, being on a proton pump inhibitor basically just means it stops the secretion of acid in your stomach. Now, the secretion of acid in your stomach is not an accident. We have evolved to have that happen at a very significant level. Like the pH of the stomach is around 2, and that'll dissolve a car. Michael can throw his motorbike in. You can eat Michael's motorbike, and there's people who have eaten cars. I know it sounds crazy. It takes a couple of years to eat a car, and I'm certainly not suggesting you do that. Anyway, can you flag that, Graham?
Yeah, we'll do.
Great, awesome. Any other questions to the panel or from the panel? Here's a question from the panel. Yes.
I've got a question. What were you talking about eating motorbikes? I was reading this book. I heard my name mentioned.
Sorry, you'll have to go back and listen to the recording.
I'll do that.
We need to get that full of peptic juice and put your bike in it.
Oh, okay. Then we'll do that. Yeah, okay, very good.
Yeah, good. That's right. That's a great peptic juice. All right, fair enough. Any other questions before? Because I've got something. Go on.
So should I take a supplement because I'm a girl?
Beg your pardon?
Should I take a supplement for calcium? Should
All right.
I be taking a supplement for calcium?
Okay, good question. So I'm going to zone in on you particularly at the moment, Anne, because there's a couple of things. There's one thing that you didn't mention, that is relevant to us here at the moment, and also one of the things I don't do is just prescribe supplements just because you think you might need it. A lot of people take supplements. It's a multi-billion-dollar industry. Let's be real here. And if you Google things, there's a lot of pressure. And even from myself, when I was in the early stages of practicing nutrition, I was more evangelistic about prescribing supplements. But I've moved and shifted over the years to try to help people get the nutrients they need from food. That's the first port of call. Having said that, if there's specific evidence in you, like for instance, say if Graham gets his bone density scan and he finds that his bone density is not optimal, well, that is one part of the evidence where we then might consider, after, by the way, looking at Graham's diet to see if he's in fact getting enough calcium. And as I said, is his vitamin D levels actually okay? That's a simple. Oh, by the way, Graham, when you ask David for the referral, ask him to do also the blood test for vitamin D for you.
Okay.
Yeah, because those those things go hand in hand, and the same applies to you, Anne. And so yeah, to answer the shorter answer to your question is no, we don't know yet. I don't have enough information about you at the moment. So first of all, I'd recommend the same thing. Ask Have you had a bone density scan?
No.
Okay. Do you mind me asking how old you are?
Yeah, 49.
49. Well, you're definitely, when you get around 50, you definitely should have, as a woman, a bone density scan, whether you think you've got osteoporosis or whether you think you're low in calcium or not. And then if it all comes back as honky-dory, you don't have to worry about it for 5 years or so. It doesn't mean that you don't look after your health, of course, and your nutrition, but you don't need to go and get tested all the time. That's what I'm saying. That's different, though, if it comes back as that you've got some, well, then you might monitor it more regularly, say once a year or something like that, because you'll probably then make more, then we'll have interventions like the things I'm about to recommend. So to answer your question, you need to get a bone density scan. You need to just have, and please, guys, take advantage of this. I charge $100 an hour for people to come and see me in the clinic. This is free. So bring your blood test in and get a good blood test profile. And what I mean by that, just your basic blood test, which is called your hematology, which is your red blood cells and white blood cells and hemoglobin, and also biochemistry. If you can't remember what I'm saying, you can listen back to the recording or send me an email. My email, and I was going to get you guys, if one of you got a pen there, just write down my email and share it around. Ask me questions. I'm jumping ahead here a little bit because next week I was going to make it the class more informal and get you guys just to ask some random questions if you like, but questions that will help you or that you're interested in. I'm not saying I know all the answers, but if you email me the questions beforehand, I can be prepped up. So don't hold back. I like completely strange questions. My email is Hart, H-A-R-T, I've got several, so I'll just give you the simple one, Hartgood, HARTGOOD.com.
Just .com?
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's a simple one, easy to remember. Hopefully you relate me to being someone good, not heart bad. All right. Easy way to remember it. So calcium. And you're going to ask David for also a referral for a bone density scan. You're going to ask to get your just standard routine blood tests, and he'll know what I mean when I say hematology and biochemistry.
Hematology and biochemistry. Yeah. Okay.
You need your vitamin D levels checked.
Yeah. Yeah.
Just having your calcium, that used to be a routine test as part of biochemistry, your calcium levels, but they don't really tell you anything unless, as we were talking about before with the parathyroid gland, unless you've got something seriously wrong. And I would be so bold as to suggest you'd probably already know that by now. So it's optional for you to get your calcium levels also measured as part of that blood test. I noticed over the last couple of years, the labs have stopped testing calcium as a normal routine blood test because they've probably thought the same thing that I have. Why is that, by the way? Your calcium levels in your blood is extremely important to maintain at a certain level. And if something happens and you don't say eat any calcium for 3 weeks, well, what your body does is start sucking it out of your bone. No questions asked. And the reason is because if you don't have those levels of calcium floating in your blood, serious things happen to you. You will die because it's related to muscle contraction, heart function, nerve conduction, things like that. So it's very important. So, so we've got to help the body by making sure we get both eat enough calcium and absorb it as well. All right. Questions? Anything, Michael?
Yeah, one more.
Oh, Graham, you go.
Did you have too much calcium?
Absolutely.
Yep.
Absolutely. Did you in Michael and Anne, your research, did you find the upper limit of calcium?
Yeah.
Upper limit, yes, the upper limit is 1,000 to 2,500 milligrams. Oh, no, hold on. No, it isn't.
It's in that
Sorry,
food synergy book you've got there. Just go to the calcium profile. I've got it here online, but I thought you could answer Graham's question there. It's called upper limit. Just go to the calcium profile. It's in alphabetical order.
Upper limit, okay. Boys 14 to 18 is 2,500 milligrams. For women over 70, it's 2,500 milligrams. For everyone, it's 2,500 milligrams.
Okay.
No matter what age you are.
Okay. All right. So it's highly unlikely, Graham, that you would overdose on calcium just from eating food. That is highly unlikely. You'd have to be eating bone broth or something for breakfast, lunch, and dinner, with something high in calcium. So it's unlikely, but it's easy to get to those levels that Michael was just talking about if you're supplementing with calcium. Because some supplements of calcium might contain 1,000 milligrams, 500 milligrams. You have to read the labels.
And the way you know is if you've got anorexia, anxiety, asthma, constipation, depression, exhaustion, fatigue, flatulence, headaches, I get headaches a lot, increased viral infections or memory impairment, muscle weakness or panic attacks.
Oh.
That's the symptoms of it for overdose.
Symptoms?
That's the symptoms if you overdose on whatever the toxicity.
Did it mention, sorry, can you do that again?
Yep. Anorexia,
Yeah.
anxiety, asthma,
Yeah.
ataxia, I don't know what that is, constipation,
Yeah.
depression, exhaustion, fatigue, flatulence, headaches, increased viral infections, memory impairment, muscle weakness, and panic attacks.
God.
That's the effects of an overdose.
Too much calcium.
Yep.
Yeah. And here's an interesting little fact for you. That's why I put those upper limits in that book there, in the Food Synergy book. Sometimes, not always, but the symptoms of overdosing in a nutrient can be similar to the symptoms of not having enough of the nutrient.
I
So
sound like, they'd be the opposite, but
yeah, so that's right. But the body is strange like that. I don't mean to call the body strange, but it works in mysterious ways, absolutely. So hence, it then goes back to, if you've got a cluster of those symptoms, for instance, Graham, don't be too quick just to jump on one thing like, oh, I've got too much calcium going on. Are you supplementing with calcium, Graham?
Me? No.
No.
I drink a lot of milk.
Yeah. Okay. So does anyone there not drink milk or not eat dairy? You all eat dairy. Okay. The reason I asked, and this is not to say you should or you shouldn't eat dairy, but as you can, if you go through that book there in the calcium profile, you'll see that dairy is a high source of calcium. You can get easily a fairly chunky amount of calcium from dairy, as long as you're absorbing it, of course. But here's an interesting point I just wanted to make, that say, for instance, you know someone, or at some point in your life you decide to stop eating dairy, and there's a lot of people that don't eat dairy for various reasons, either allergies or other things as well. So the question then comes is, can you get enough calcium through your diet without taking supplements? I'm putting that out to you guys. Again, a rhetorical question. Have a wild.
Yeah, you could do.
Could do?
You
Yep.
could do quite. If you eat green veggies and almonds and stuff like that.
Yep. An orange.
Eggs.
Yep. That's right. So the answer to that is, as Michael said, the answer is yes, but you have to do something like go through that profile there and add up the RDIs. And if you get close to 100%, in other words, if you go through those foods there in that book in front of you, and then you find that without dairy, you're still getting around 100%, well, that's great. But interestingly, if you don't, if that sums that up to say 20%, then you're in a category of either changing your diet or considering calcium supplementation. That's a really important point. So it's not that relevant. Well, it's relevant to the calcium supplementation thing, may be relevant to two of you there, but for other reasons. So, all right.
I suppose you wanted to just eat sardines and almonds and broccoli and stuff like that every day.
That's right.
Then you'd be okay. If not, if you don't like those foods, then hard to get that. Yeah.
That's right. And why are sardines a good source of calcium?
I have no idea.
Have a wild stab. Do you eat sardines?
No, not really.
Okay.
The sardines.
What's that?
The edible bones in the
Correct.
in sardines.
Correct.
That's the part I can't. I don't like bones.
So if you go, and that's the same for salmon, tin salmon at least. You eat tin salmon or tin sardines, you have to disguise it in your food. Always cook the bones because it's a great source of calcium. That's what we've been talking about, bones and calcium. If you struggle with it, hopefully I can come in there before all this is over and show you how to cook things like sardines and salmon so as to disguise the what you don't like about them, which is usually the smell.
I'm really curious to ask a question.
Yes.
Is very slightly off topic. Chia seeds, do they need to be crushed or soaked?
Thank you.
Yes, they do.
Which
absolutely.
one? Crushed.
We actually mentioned that when we went through those pancake recipes the other day. Both chia seeds. What's that?
Do you crush them or you soak them?
Well, people do both. If you soak chia seeds overnight, they puff up and they look like frog's eggs in the morning, and they become quite gelatinous. My personal choice, favorite, is to crush them or grind them because they contain within them a lot of omega-3. They're very high, and this relates exactly to flax seeds or linseeds. Flax seeds and chia seeds and hemp seeds, the ones without the you-know-what in it, are very high sources of omega-3. So we bought a coffee grinder there, but it disappeared. I don't know what happened to it. But if you want your own coffee grinder and be nice and don't do anything strange, you can grind chia seeds and flax seeds and then sprinkle that. Well, what I do, so I'm not always grinding that, I grind a good amount and then put it in a jar and store it in the fridge, and it lasts for weeks like that. But you've got to keep it in the fridge because once you grind the chia seeds or the flax seeds, the omega-3s in them are very volatile. They're very sensitive to heat and light, so they change their composition. It's like fats that go rancid. Well, fatty acids, the omega-3s are basically their fatty acids. So things like light. That's why I've gone off fish oils. Fish oils is another multi-billion-dollar industry, and it's been sold and touted, and it's true. They're high potentially in omega-3 fatty acids. But because of the storage and transport and processing, There's so many steps that can interfere. Think of omega-3s as very fragile. So yes, you can use a mortar and pestle as well, Anne, if you don't have a coffee grinder there. I don't know if Pridip's got a mortar and pestle.
He has, yeah.
Yeah, you can use that. So that will give you a bit of exercise at the same time, which is good. It'll give you some a bit more bone density in your arms at least. I have something I wanted to show you just for the last few minutes. Do we have any other questions?
I haven't got a question, but you just noticed something that we left out that was relatively important, I thought.
Yeah, what's that?
Read it. It's just in relation to what the functions do when you have the right amount of calcium. It activates insulin and thyroid hormone release, blood clotting, bone and tooth formation, cell membrane permeability, cell signaling, biomineralization, and decreases blood level of the intensity factor, and blood acid and alkaline balance, muscle contraction, nerve transmission, and regulation of cell division and hormone secretion, and it regulates your heartbeat.
There you go.
I just thought that was it.
Yeah, that's right. There's a lot there, isn't there? So you can see how important it actually is in the body. We touched on a couple of those things, the muscle contraction and the nerve conduction, but that's great. So let me just power into this last little thing. So it's a bit of a confronting area, but it's also relevant to some people at different times. So I'm just going to quickly just share that and bring that up. Can you guys read that all right? And girls?
Yeah.
Okay, so here we go. I'm just going to power into this, and you can take this for what it's worth. This, we've had talks at different times. Now, both recreational drugs and medication drugs is well known to increase the requirement for certain nutrients. And that is because there are things called drug-nutrient interactions. So in regards to calcium, I'm just showing this little thing on meth, because meth is obviously a problem in the world, not just in Australia. And I got some of this information from the Colorado Drug Rehab Center. And they've indicated that there's more people searching for info on meth recovery than any other drug. So unfortunately, it's a problem on this planet at the moment in many things. Yeah. So just here we go. I'm just going to just quickly read these out and just go through this. So depending on your age and the strength of your heart and circulatory system, meth use may cause heart attacks, strokes, and even comas can come from increased heart activity and elevated blood pressure. The spoiler here is obviously I'm showing you this because it has a link in with calcium. And as Michael just pointed out, heart activity is calcium relates to that. So what we've just shown in this slide may indirectly relate to calcium as well. Low sex hormones so this happens when you're in a withdrawal phase from meth. Chronic use of crystal meth depletes the body of calcium and causes decayed teeth as well as brittle bones, especially larger bones of the legs and hip. Most people that have fractures are of the hip, as we said, but also the larger bones, the femur. Femur is the largest bone in the body, which is your upper leg bone. What was that, Anne?
You can die. Is it true that you can die if the femur bone is broken and you don't receive treatments like quickly?
Well, not directly from that, but the femur. There's important arteries that flow through that area. So yeah, it can be indirect, but yeah, anything that's broken in the body and is not allowed to heal and repair is a real problem. Absolutely. The depletion of nutrient. This is related to meth withdrawal and use. The depletion of nutrients causes the skin to display fatigue as well as the sensation that bugs are crawling under my skin. Obviously, this relates to people in recovery. The best way to get through a withdrawal period, specifically in relation to meth, but there's some overlap here with anything, alcohol and other drugs too. The best way to get through a withdrawal period is to take CalMag. Ask me about that next week because we're going to run out of time. That's calcium magnesium combination. I'm more inclined to recommend that if you're going to take calcium, and B vitamins and sleep as long as you can. Upon awakening, eat a well-balanced, protein-rich diet and expect to have mood swings. This is in relation to recovery from meth. Long-term strategy: repair the brain, nutrify the body, and feed your gut bugs. You were asking about that the other day, and the gut bugs, probiotics, that's what they are. Build up questions here and ask me next week. Anne has my email address. Get that. Send me your questions via email by next Thursday, and we can talk about those. So the onus, I won't prepare a class specifically other than respond to your questions. And last thing, long-term strategy, repair the brain. Ask me a question about that next week, Anne. There are strategies for that. That's really important. Stop toxic intake, obviously. Supply protein building blocks, energy, glucose or ketones, cofactors, which are the minerals and vitamins. Use new regions of the brain.
I have been.
Great. Flood the frontal cortex with light. That's meditation. And circulate blood through the brain, and that's exercise. Okie dokie.
Okay, thank you. I'm going to put your email in right now.
And make sure the boys have it too, and keep on top of them, Anne, and make sure they send me that email. I don't share your email with anyone, so just to let you know, you can feel
Okay.
see you next week, and just to have a little break from the normal class. Well, we've been going through the psyche with the in the mindfulness class, but next week I'm going to prepare a little class on meditation. So rather than and then we'll go back to asking you guys what you'd like to focus on. But because I've been involved in meditation for next year, it'll be 40 years, I thought, well, hey, I must have some qualification to talk about it. So, so that's what I'm going to do. Jesus, I must have learned something in 40 years. We'll have a talk around that. It's on Wednesday. Thank you all for coming. It's a great class, and thank you for your presentation, both of you. It was awesome. I really enjoyed it. Very stimulating.
Now to get some vitamin D.
Oh, I need food. I'm starving.
I've got to keep eating up his like too.
Bye, Hart.
See you.
Thank you.
Take care.
I just